drone that costs less than a smartphone just forced a military convoy to stop in seconds. Not by destroying everything, but by hitting one precise moment that changed the entire situation. And this isn't an isolated incident. Across multiple battlefields, small, low-cost drones are doing something unexpected. They're not just supporting operations anymore. They're starting to dictate how those operations unfold. For decades, military power followed a simple logic. The more advanced your technology, the more dominant your force. Better armor, better sensors, higher cost. But that assumption is starting to break. These drones are cheap, mass-produced, and often considered expendable. Yet somehow they're forcing far more expensive systems to stop, adapt, or fail under pressure. And that raises a much bigger question. From the ground, everything appears controlled. The convoy is moving as expected, maintaining distance, following standard procedure. There are no visible threats, no incoming fire, no reason to stop. But above them, something is already in position, watching, tracking, learning their movement in real time. And that's when the situation quietly changes, because the attack doesn't begin with the explosion. It begins the moment the convoy becomes predictable. What makes this tactic effective is not speed, but timing. One drone observes, another moves into position. Nothing happens yet. And that's exactly why it works. Because the convoy keeps moving, deeper into a situation it doesn't even recognize. The lead vehicle becomes a reference point. The spacing becomes predictable. And without realizing it, the entire formation is being shaped into something far easier to isolate and far easier to stop. The first strike doesn't destroy the convoy. It doesn't need to. The lead vehicle is hit, and suddenly everything stops. Movement breaks, spacing collapses, the entire formation loses momentum in seconds. And that's the critical moment. Because a stopped convoy is no longer a moving target. It becomes something else entirely. Something fixed, something exposed. And for the drone operator above, this is where the real control begins. Then the second strike hits. Not the front, but the rear. And just like that, the convoy is no longer delayed. It's contained. Front blocked, rear blocked, no clear path forward. And now every movement becomes predictable. Every reaction becomes visible. This isn't just an attack anymore. It's a controlled environment where the drones don't need to rush. They only need to wait and respond to whatever happens next. The response comes quickly. Soldiers fire upward, trying to track targets that are small, fast, and constantly shifting. Some drones are hit, most are not. Electronic systems attempt to interfere to break the connection. But these drones don't rely on a single link. They adjust, reroute, continue. And with each passing second, more of them appear. Not enough to overwhelm instantly, but enough to make every response feel just slightly too late. And this is where the imbalance becomes clear. The convoy isn't completely destroyed, but it doesn't need to be. It's no longer moving, no longer effective, no longer in control. And above it, systems that cost a fraction of the price are deciding what happens next. A few $1,000s, forcing equipment worth millions to stop, wait, and react. And that raises a difficult question. Not just about tactics, but whether cost alone still defines power in modern warfare. Then suddenly, something changes. One vehicle breaks formation. It accelerates forward, trying to push through the blockade. For a moment, it works. Distance opens, space appears, and it feels like an escape might actually be possible. But the drones don't panic. They adjust, they track, they predict movement in real time. And just as the gap begins to form, the window starts to close faster than anyone on the ground can react. The strike comes at the exact wrong moment. Not when the vehicle was slow, but when it was trying to escape. The impact doesn't destroy everything, but it doesn't have to. Speed drops, control is lost, and the attempt ends just short of breaking through. For a brief second, there was a way out, but that window disappears as quickly as it opened. And in that moment, the outcome isn't uncertain anymore. It's already been decided. The convoy isn't completely destroyed, but it doesn't need to be. It's no longer moving, no longer maneuvering, no longer in control of the situation. And that's the key difference. Because in modern warfare, mobility is survival. Once that's gone, everything else becomes secondary. What remains isn't a battle anymore. It's a stalled system, waiting, reacting, and steadily losing options with every passing minute. This is what makes low-cost drone tactics so effective. Not because they destroy everything, but because they change who controls the fight. Instead of relying on a few advanced systems, they rely on many simple ones. Distributed, replaceable, constantly adapting. And that creates a difficult reality, because the advantage is no longer just technology. It's how quickly that technology can be scaled, replaced, and sent back into the fight again. And this is where the real question begins. If a system that costs a few $1,000s can stop something worth millions, is modern military spending still sustainable? Or are expensive systems becoming too complex and too slow to adapt to this kind of threat? Because right now, cheap and scalable systems are forcing change faster than many expected. And the question isn't just who wins, it's whether the rules of warfare have already changed. At this point, the problem isn't just the attack, it's the inability to respond effectively. Targets appear and disappear before they can be tracked. Angles shift, speed changes, nothing stays predictable long enough, and every attempt to react feels slightly delayed. Not by seconds, but just enough to make each response less effective than the one before. And that's where the pressure builds, not from destruction, but from the growing sense that control is no longer yours. What makes this even harder to deal with is how difficult these drones are to counter. They're small, low signature, hard to track consistently, radar struggles to lock. Electronic systems interfere, but not always enough. And even when one drone is stopped, another one is already moving into position. Not faster, just more persistent. And over time, that persistence becomes the deciding factor. Because defense has to succeed every time, while failure only needs to happen once. By this point, the outcome is already clear. Not because everything has been destroyed, but because nothing can move forward anymore. And that changes how the situation is understood. This isn't about winning quickly, it's about controlling what happens next, step by step, response by response, until the system on the ground is no longer deciding anything at all. And once that control is gone, it rarely returns on the same terms again.